All right, we are taking our last look at every team's 2024 season as a whole before we tick over into 2025. Today, it is all about the Cats, but before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know how you rate the Cats' 2024 campaign. So, let's crack in. This season review is brought to you by SkillsBeast, the best teaching apparatus to learn how to kick effectively with the correct technique every time. No matter what your age or skill level, SkillsBeast will transform your kick. Head to skillsbeast.com to instantly kick better. And here to break this all down for me, as always, Darren Parkin, AFL commentator and analyst. Darren, Cats always thereabouts, but now we're looking at they've lost the last 5 of their last 7 preliminary finals.
Yeah, they have. And if you go back to when the era started, sort of 2007, that's now 13 preliminary finals for them over that journey to go with 6 grand finals and 4 premierships. And they just keep defying what the natural order of events might seem to be. They fell out of the finals last year, having won the flag the year before, and you looked at the age profile of their list, and you knew that Hawkins and Tui and these sorts of guys, Mitch Duncan, were coming towards the end of the line, and you thought, well, maybe finally they'll have to readjust for a little while. But they were able to do that by bringing in young players, but actually got better in the process and finished top 4. If you break it down, the season was fascinating, but if you look at the prelim where they were 28 points in front, they actually hit the front with 5 minutes to go as well. And then the way Sydney played on grand final day, it was not a stretch to suggest Geelong were 5 minutes away from winning another flag had they have got through and played that. But won their first 7 and then went 9-9 after that. So it obviously goes to show that they did come back to the pack a little bit. And defensively was a bit of a worry for them. So they were the 3rd highest scoring team in the competition, but ranked 11th for defence. And if you factor that in, no one's won a premiership in the AFL era ranked lower than 5th defensively and mostly top 4 through that period. So they could get opened up a little bit. They lost games by 64, 63, 47 and 30. And they had 2 big turnarounds in the back end of the year. The Saints outscored them by 51 points in the second half, and then Brisbane's 39-point turnaround in the prelims. So a bit uncharacteristic for them to be opened up in the way that they were, but they obviously got themselves right into the frame and weren't far off.
So coming into the 2024 season, in terms of expectations, obviously they needed to return to finals, but then there's always questions about their age profile, as you said.
Yeah, I think for them at the start of the year, if you had said, what do you expect from them? You thought, all challenge for the finals, and if they can get in there, that's a good result. So definitely a pass for them. And yeah, given the age of their midfield, which we'll go through a little bit later on, and how they brought in some fresh faces, I think it's a success, even if the Cats always probably expect more than that.
Yeah, as a non-supporter, I think it's a pass, but I think supporters probably wanted a flag, but, that's how it is. All right, looking at some of the lowlights for the season for Geelong. So their highest ranked clearance player amongst their mids was actually Tanner Bruin at 54.
Yeah, 54th best ranked clearance player in the AFL. And you got, for disposals, Max Holmes, who had a great year, was 23rd. Brian Myers back at 58. So they didn't have a lot of those, I guess, mids that were, elite on performance throughout the course of the year. Max Holmes, probably for his role, was relatively close to that. I mean, Dangerfield, who they manage a little bit. He was obviously very influential. Cam Guthrie was injured for a long period of time, so that hurt them. And then obviously transitioning into younger midfielders with Bowes and those sorts of players. And I guess looking at a couple of the others, obviously Sam de Koning lost his way a little bit. There were some injuries and some form that played a bit of a part in that. And to the eye, I mean, it's very difficult to back this one up with stats because I'm not sure they keep stats for this type of thing, but it looked like they were exposed for pace at times. So that's where they got caught. Brisbane in the prelim just threw caution to the wind and ran and were able to sort of cut them up in that space. So they'll be going to work on that, I would think, in terms of trying to address that as a manner that they were beaten up at times.
Yeah, no, I always trust the eye test. All right, looking on the positive side, so the highlights, some players here that have really emerge this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very Geelong thing to do, to grab players that aren't necessarily household names and turn them into top shelf performers. You look at Sean Manor as a classic example of that as a mature age recruit. Shannon Neal taking his role in the key position stocks. Ollie Dempsey, who we'll touch on a little bit, had a brilliant year. Lawson Humphreys, towards the end of it, was really racking up the disposals, got votes in the Rising Star. And then guys that have been there for a little while, Max Holmes, the unlucky story a couple of years ago when they won the premiership with his injury in the finals, but he had a terrific year, 605 disposals, I think, over the course of the season for him. And, they were able to rebuild their midfield a little bit on the spot. It's not where they want it to be, but, Tanner Bruin and Bose and those sorts of players really got them going.
Yep. And this next segment is brought to us thanks to Skills Beast, who have been helping AFL players of all skill levels transform their kicks. So, in terms of who transformed their game for Geelong this year, we mentioned him just before, but Ollie Dempsey.
Yeah, it showed the signs way back in round one or round two, whatever they wanted to call it, round zero, then round one. But he had kicked 3 goals and had 18 possessions that night and then kept on going. So he'd only played 7 games coming into this year across the last 2 years, kicked 2 goals in that time, but played every game this year, kicked 22 goals for the season, 436 disposals, so averaging about 17 a game, and won the Rising Star. So we were looking for which of the kids would be the breakout once Harley Reid got suspended, and it sort of threw the race open, and Ollie Dempsey was the one who went on to win that, and rightfully so.
Yep. And if there's one thing we know at Zero Hanger, it is headlines. And Geelong, a couple of things here. So there was a little bit of chatter around the salary cap and the Cotton On sponsorship with Bailey Smith, which is quite an interesting one.
Yeah, so obviously the partnership that Bailey had with them, the partnership they have with Geelong, and then it comes down to salary cap and how do you work that in terms of what the sponsor contributes and how much of it is, put under the cap. It's not the first time we've seen stuff like that. You go back to Carlton with Vizzy and Chris Judd and all of that sort of stuff as to how much can they, if they employ someone in a role, are they allowed to do that? Does it blur the lines? So that was interesting. And then Clayton Oliver, the talk around him, obviously the will they or won't they with Melbourne, and Geelong landed as the most likely suitor towards the end of that period, but didn't end up happening for a number of reasons. You'd think price would be one of the major factors in that, but if there's a big name on the table, Geelong are usually in that conversation.
Yep, absolutely. Now, I don't have a strong opinion on the sponsorship thing, but I have to say, if I was a player or even a coach, I think Geelong is the club that I would want to be, because there seem to be a lot of benefits playing down at Geelong or at West Coast and get a Hungry Jacks franchise. So, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. That'd work for me.
And the ins and outs for Geelong this year, we'll start with the outs. 2 massive retirements in Tom Hawkins and Zach Tui.
Yeah, Tom Hawkins, one of the all-time greats. Body was pretty banged up by the end of it, and had that breakout way back in the 2011 grand final. He was a premiership player 2 years before that, but 2011 was the coming of age when James Podsiadly went down with the shoulder in that grand final, and he dominated the second half as the Cats got up. Zach Tui, one of the better Irish experiments, if you will, to come across, playing for Carlton and the Cats, and had a terrific career, and throwing a couple of other premiership players too that were delisted, Brandon Parfitt and Gary Rowan, who's popped up at local level. So it's a bit of a changing of the guard with those guys all moving on.
Yeah, losing 4 premiership players, pretty interesting one. And then in terms of the players gained, so obviously the whole trade period was basically about Bailey Smith.
Yeah, it was, and he was their main target. And they picked up Jack Martin. The Cats got a pretty good record with, recycled talent over the journey. And Jack Martin, delisted free agent whose body let him down at Carlton towards the end. In fact, through most of his time there. So we'll see if Geelong can salvage something out of that. And then their draft haul involved a couple of cracks at some academy players. Lennox Hoffman was in the Saints Academy, for example. They got him, but didn't enter the draft until the mid-40s, which is not uncommon for the Cats.
Yep. All right, so looking ahead to 2025, so their pass mark, I feel like I say this every year, but they're gonna want to be top 4. I don't know if they're going to make it top 4, and there's also their age the edge of their list.
Yeah, there's the same questions that sort of pop up all the time. Look, they keep defying that. You'd be brave to ever write them off, and I'm not going to do that. I think if most people previewed the season, they might find a couple of teams they think are better or think have more depth or slightly more rounded, and I'm one of those. I'm not sure they're quite at the top of my ladder, but I think they'll squeeze every drop out of themselves and challenge as far as they possibly can. So they're a wonderful club, and you'd be brave to ever bet against them.
Yeah, absolutely. I've learned my lesson the hard way. They're in the top 8. All right, well, that wraps it up for our season review for 2024 for the Cats. Thank you, Darren. Always thereabouts.
Always, yeah. They've missed the finals, I think, twice in 18 years, and they just keep finding ways to bounce back. As we said, 15 top 4 finishes, 13 prelims, 6 grand finals, and 4 flags. You can't say too much more than that.
Yeah, it's a place to be. So let us know in the comments if you are brave enough to write off Geelong in 2025. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, like some videos, and catch all the latest AFL news at zerohanger.com. This season review was brought to you by Skills Beast. Instantly kick better. Head to skillsbeast.com for more info.